Welcome back, Beans Army, to another episode of the Less is More Sports Podcast, the college offseason podcast, where you could say we're less of the regular season, but more of the offseason. Last week, we talked about the quarterbacks of the portal, and much to our surprise, Kyle McCord does not end up picking Nebraska, but he ends up shocking us and going to Syracuse. So before we get on to today's topic, Matt, little simple thoughts on that surprising move.
Well, I mean, you hit it on the head. It's a surprise. I mean, it's like we said, the ACC is kind of a conference where you go to rehab your image a little bit. So I think he's going to do it. I think that's what he went there to do. I think he's going to do it. I surprised he only has about 1 year of eligibility remaining, but it's the new NCAA. That could easily skyrocket into 4 more years any minute now. But yeah, that move definitely surprised me, caught me off guard. But I thought when you're gonna have to help me with the pronunciation here. When that Rayola, is that how you pronounce it?
Dylan Rayola.
When Rayola committed to Nebraska, I was kind of thinking well, having both probably isn't the best idea. So I thought Kyle McCord would maybe look elsewhere, but Syracuse with a new coach in the ACC kind of surprised me. So yeah, I'm surprised.
Well, I would say, well, I mean, it kind of ties into what I said. If I'm Kyle McCord, I have all this talent around me at Ohio State, and why would I think I could not make it work at Ohio State and potentially go to another Power Five conference and Power Five school and make it work? But I mean, essentially, the College Football Committee told us that the ACC isn't a Power Five conference, so I guess this works.
Heyo.
So fair enough. And also, um, Dylan Rayola has not officially committed to Nebraska, but he was on a visit this weekend. I do want
Okay.
to clear that up.
Well, I thought when he was there, just in general, it's we can go either way here. Maybe go to a team that is a little bit more eager to have you on board. I don't blame that. I don't blame him for that at all.
Right, right. No, I was just wanted to make sure that was clear so nobody comes in the comment sections like, well, Rayola hasn't committed yet. We know. Just letting you know, like he was on the official visit to Nebraska, and it's a very strong possibility he could flip from Georgia to Nebraska, but only time will tell. But as for the main topic of today's podcast, like I said earlier, we talked about the quarterbacks last week. Today, we're going to talk about the skill players, the running backs, the receivers, the tight ends, all those guys. And we're going to kick it off with a player that we ended last week's show talking about. And the number one rated running back in the transfer portal right now, Trevor Etienne, transferring from Florida. And the crystal ball has him officially going to Georgia. So, Matt, overall thoughts on the Trevor Etienne move?
It's amazing to me, Wes, how many people were commenting, talking this week about what the hell is going on at Georgia? Why are all these five-star kids entering the portal? What has Kirby Smart done? Is it over for Kirby Smart? Yada, yada, yada. And it's just no, no, that's just what happens when you are Georgia and you have such an embarrassment of riches and only one football to go around. And you've only got 11 guys on the field at any given time. And even in the portal, you've got a guy who's as talented, explosive, and I can't even think of any other third proper superlative to describe the kid's game. And Etienne coming in potentially, it makes sense why some guy who took 3 snaps at wide receiver last year is leaving, even if he is a 5-star recruit. You've got one football, you've got 11 guys on the field. People have to move, and I mean, once again, this just shows to me that the transfer portal, we are all complaining and moaning, or a lot of us were, about how the small schools are doomed, man. Small schools, they aren't going to get players anymore, and it's no, it can happen to the big schools too. It's happened to them before, and it's happening to them now at positions that aren't just quarterback. And
Right.
we've got a huge one here with Etienne in Georgia. I mean, you just kind of tip your cap to Georgia. That's the main rival. That's in the same conference, which is expanding, and you're still in on a guy who's that explosive, who's that talented, who goes to a rival school, and you're pirating your own power. The SEC is cannibalizing itself, and it's amazing because there wasn't this kind of drama in the past, and now you have another layer when they meet up at Jacksonville next year. You have another possible entry point in the rivalry. And like I said, when you've just got that much power that you're drawing in guys from other schools in your conference, in your division, who are your top rivals, it just makes college football, as the kids say, a little spicier.
I want to touch on a couple things that you said there. I agree 100% with you because what the old heads don't realize is that, yes, with the transfer portal, the big schools will be able to get talented players come in. But in return, a lot of players that are deep on the depth chart, who remind you were also 4 and 5 star recruits,
Yep.
will be going out. So it'll all balance out. And as far as Trevor Etienne potentially, because he hasn't committed yet, potentially going to Georgia, yes, like you said, this is an embarrassment of riches. And if he does end up going to Georgia, he could potentially be, in my opinion, he'll be the best running back they've had since DeAndre Swift, who last season was in 2019. But another thing about Georgia is that Ladd McConkey, we don't know if he will leave or whatever, but they got his replacement almost lined up with London Humphreys. So
Yep.
Georgia is also, like you said, I mean, they have a lot of players going out, but I mean, they're going to have a lot of players coming in. But the thing about Etienne that I want to talk about the most is that, like I said, if he does go to Georgia, which is where the crystal ball is projecting him to go, I do think it'll work out. I think it'll be great for him. I mean, Georgia will be better. They'll have, like I said, the best running back they've had since DeAndre Swift. But I have an intriguing idea with that. Why not go to Clemson potentially if you're Trevor Etienne? Because here's the thing, Clemson's been in some hot water, Dabo Swinney in particular, for not looking like the contending team that they've been in the majority part of the 2010s decades. They haven't been a playoff contender since Trevor Etienne's brother was on the team. He had, like I said, he has family ties. His brother is the all-time leading rusher in the ACC. And could this potentially be the move to boost the morale to get Clemson back on track? That was an interesting point I wanted to talk about with Trevor Etienne, and I wanted your thoughts on that, Matt.
I think Clemson is. You want to talk about a team where it does kind of concern me? All the 5 star guys are leaving.
Clemson.
Clemson kind of concerns me there because whether we want to own up to it or not, whether or not his phone call with that guy was hilarious,
Mm-hmm.
Dabo Swinney is developing kind of a reputation now. Whether we want to admit it or not, as like an old timer, an old head, as you would say,
An old head,
who's
yeah.
who's a little bit of a NIL is wrong, Clemson God and country type mindset. And a lot of 5 star guys, I think, might get turned off by that. And that's my big concern with Clemson now. I mean, I'm not saying this to be overly critical of anybody. People are who they are, and that's fine. But I feel like that in this modern college football landscape is kind of reflecting poorly on them. I mean, I feel like half their defense is gone. They lost a cornerback to Missouri, and that was like domino number one. We're still waiting to hear about Will Shipley too, whether or not he's sticking around. So I get why you'd be hesitant to join Clemson right now. They're bound for a rebound. Like I said, it's hard to bury anybody in any sport until like you get the confirmation or somebody leaves. So I'm not going to bury Clemson or say like, "Oh my God, they're doomed for the bottom half of the ACC," because that's not true. But I am concerned. I feel like a reputation in the era of NIL, with the ruling we just got this weekend that multiple time transfers they don't have to pay the price anymore.
Right.
It's just another layer of it gets rid of a lot of unnecessary paperwork complications, but it introduces a lot more complicated interpersonal complications. And that's where I think a guy like Dabo Swinney may have to step the game up a little bit because when you get a reputation, it's like whenever you think of Woody Hayes, you don't think about the great wins he had at Ohio State. What do you think about? You think about him punching that guy on Clemson during that bowl game. So I mean, when you get a reputation, it's incredibly hard to shake it, even if you do have national championships. So yeah, while that would be intriguing, I don't blame anybody for not really joining the ACC right now because, like you said, Les, the committee basically told them they're not a Power Five conference. Clemson's got a coach with a little bit of a reputation, and I, if you get and the money's just not there that I assume that Georgia's going to offer in NIL.
Right. Right. And that's kind of where I was going is like, Trevor Etienne could be the move to boost the morale and like kind of, I guess, halt that reputation that Dabo Swinney is developing. But no, I agree with you 100%. And this is why this move was so intriguing to me. But I want to move on from Trevor Etienne and talk about another running back in the portal that you and I are both really high on, who has committed to his new school, and that is Rocket Sanders officially going to South Carolina. Matt, overall thoughts on that?
Now, you know how I just said like it was a brilliant move for Georgia? This is one that perplexes me because, the SEC, it's still the SEC. And South Carolina, I'm trying to think, they lost one of their best wide receivers of the transfer portal. Is Spencer Rattler still a thing? Can he come back? Or is he
He might
finally
be out.
finished?
I think he might be out of eligibility.
So it's like, I guess if you are Rocket Raheem Sanders, you'll be the focus of like that team's offense. But that was another one that kind of like caught me off guard because it's like he could go to the Big Ten and probably be like a standout running back. He could go anywhere to, be really good. He's from Florida. So I wonder if that's one of those I just want to get closer to home, which is totally respectable. If we talk about we respect players as much as we do, if somebody wants to move closer to home, I am not going to blame them for that, especially because I don't know what's going on in their lives. But it just surprised me to see that because it's like it's a cross divisional move in the SEC. And I mean, yes, the SEC East in general is weaker than the SEC West, but as we're going to talk about in a bit, Missouri's finally got a coach who I think can make them consistently good. Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, and we're going to talk about them because I like to make you suffer, but Kentucky even has
Mhm.
gone out and revamped a lot of like their offense. So it's like it just seems like a lateral move to me rather than anything that will like elevate anybody's game.
And I do want to talk about that. Spencer Rattler has actually declared for the 2024 NFL draft, which is a little surprising to me because I look at this quarterback class and it's absolutely loaded. And it's part of the reasons why there's so much buzz about Quinn Ewers returning to Texas next year. But yeah, so I think you're on the right. I think you're on to something. I mean, he might be the lead focus of an SEC team, and that might be closer to home. But Rocket Sanders to me is another example of South Carolina just seems like they get all these high profile transfer positions at the skill guys or the quarterbacks, but the problem is they don't get enough meat. They don't get enough of like the guys that do the dirty work to actually help win football games. And I think that's been one of the biggest downfalls of the Shane Beamer era because there's so much talent on the offensive side of the ball in South Carolina, but they can't get any of the guys that make the dirty plays. So I think Raheem Sanders or Rocket Sanders, whatever you want to call him, I think is another good move in that regard. But overall, yeah, I mean, he's just going to be another one of those guys that get in the portal. Another question I have, and speaking going from somebody who just came from South Carolina to a guy who is leaving South Carolina and potentially going somewhere else, Mario Anderson, if he does indeed decide to go to USC, is there some kind of pipeline developing between South Carolina running backs and Lincoln Riley coach teams? Because if you remember, USC got a running back from South Carolina last year in Marshawn Lloyd. And if Mario Anderson goes to USC this year, could there be a pipeline between the two USCs?
I never thought of it like that. But yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, think about it. He's already got a pipeline with Oklahoma quarterbacks. What's the worst that could happen?
Right, fair enough. Speaking of Oklahoma, I want to talk about the two Big 12 schools that are going to be joining the SEC next year in Oklahoma and Texas, who are also already hitting the portal. You have Deion Burks, the former receiver from Purdue, who is going to be at Oklahoma next year. And then you have Matthew Golden, who the former Houston receiver, who is going to be going to Texas next year, who is already committed. So, Matt, talk to me about how important it is for these two teams leaving a conference. And, think outside the box here, not just Texas and Oklahoma, but you look at all the teams that are going to be moving in the conference realignment. How important is it going to be to hit the portal, get some experienced guys at these skill positions to make the transition easier into the next conference?
Well, first off, I do want to say that of those two, I mean, I'm very intrigued to see what Matthew Golden will do at Texas. I think he's one of the most underrated wide receivers in the nation right now. I mean, 6 foot, 190-pound guy, really impressive. He was impressive last year with like a listless Houston team. I can't
Mm-hmm.
imagine what he'll do with either Arch or Quinn Ewers at Texas. I think he's going to be a breakout guy next year. I really do. I was high
Mm-hmm.
on him to start the season, then Houston kind of faltered. I'm high on him now. Deion Burks, it's hard for me to like to judge because anybody outside like the mid-tier competition of the Big Ten, it's just kind of like, are they good? Are they bad? Or are they just stuck on IU or Purdue? So I think definitely going to be better. I think that's going to be big for Jackson to get like a good quarterback with, to get a good wide receiver to throw to. But to answer your overall question, yeah, I mean, I don't think it can be understated how important that is. I mean, especially like when you're Texas and Oklahoma and you're going to the SEC. People will oftentimes complain like, "Oh, it's overrated, it's underrated." Either way, it's one of the top conferences in college football, and you're getting used to new rivalries, new travel schedules, new this, that, and the other thing, and you're just playing new environments all the time. And what it's important to have in places like that is, to bring in another sport, Kansas played their first road game at Indiana in college basketball yesterday, and it took them some time to adapt, but eventually the veteran guys got it done. And then it's kind of the same, in college football. You get veteran presence, even though they're in a new place, they know what it takes to be a college football player. They establish a routine, they set a culture, or help the coach set a culture. They know what they're doing. They know the motions, even if it's a little bit more enhanced at Texas than it is at Houston. And you're going to need that when you're playing at Tuscaloosa on a Saturday night, and then next week you're home for maybe not nobody like Iowa State, but you're going up against like Georgia the next week because that's just the conference you're in now. Same thing for USC. You're going cross country all of a sudden now, and you're playing at Indiana, which you should win, but it's Indiana and it's cold and it's November, and then you come back home and you play Ohio State, and it's just like, oh my God, how do we do this? And that's where you need veteran guys to come in and be like, we're good. You just got to focus on us, focus on business, stand on business, as the kids
Stand
say,
on
and
business.
play hard and go out and win some ball games. And I think that when you get guys like that, that's exactly when you get a guy like that, even as a Power Five school, even when you're changing conferences, that's something you can't put a price on.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go a different direction with this because I look at the skill guys that are in the portal that are going that Oklahoma and Texas are both targeting. And I look at the overall trajectory of both schools. And if I am a wide receiver, and this is going to sound so cliche coming from me, and and you probably know what's coming, and you're probably going to shake your head, but I am going in a direction in this. If I'm a wide receiver currently in the portal, and my choices are coming down between Oklahoma and Texas, my question is, why would you not go to Texas in this scenario? We're talking about a program that is trajecting in a better direction. They're in the college football playoff. They have an offensive minded coach. You'll more than likely have a higher profile quarterback throwing you the ball next year. And to top it off, four of Texas's main targets will more than likely be gone next year. Texas will be more than likely depleted at the wide receiver position. So if you really want to come in and play and make an impact week one, Texas might be the place to go. And anybody who watches this podcast knows that I'm insanely high on Jonte Cook, who will be a sophomore next year. And but Matthew Golden, you're high on him. I think he's a very underrated receiver myself. But I mean, Texas is gonna need more depth than that. I'm still a firm believer that Evan Stewart will end up somehow transferring to Texas when all this is said and done. But yeah, if you're a receiver in the portal, I don't know why, if you're choosing between Oklahoma and Texas, I don't know why Texas wouldn't be the move in this regard.
Right. I get where you're coming from too. I mean, you've been critical of Brent Venables in the past, and his offensive play coaching, his offensive play calling, my bad, maybe more rough around the edges than it would be with Steve Sarkisian. So I get where you're saying that.
Right. But overall, any other targets you want to talk about real quick? I know I feel like I've asked majority of the questions to start this podcast. Do you want to go into any
Yes,
specific
I do.
players?
I do
Yes.
love because, well, not really specific players, but well, yes, specific players, but on the overall. Les, I was thinking about this morning because when I got on Twitter this morning, I saw that Louisville had got a pretty big portal target in Colin Lacey out of South Alabama, another wide receiver.
Hmm.
And earlier that day, they got defensive back Don Chaney Jr. from Miami. Earlier, they got Ja'Cory Brooks from Alabama, which was a pretty big one, I thought. They've got Mark Redmond, the tight end from San Diego State, coming in. And they got one of the more interesting guys in the portal, and Thor Griffith from Harvard coming over, which is just a cool name. Thor Griffith coming over from Harvard, in addition to getting their new quarterback for next season. And all I could think about is, Jeff Brom and Deion Sanders are incredibly similar. because they both have really come out of nowhere to build pretty darn good to build rosters out of the transfer portal. The only difference is scheduling and talking. You know, Jeff Brom really isn't much of a talker. Let's be honest.
Right.
He's not the biggest, most loud personality in the room, but he and Deion Sanders are kind of doing the same thing. They've really built like rosters from the transfer portal, and although people want to talk about, well, they had opposite seasons. If you gave Colorado Louisville schedule and Louisville Colorado schedule, how would that have planned out? Do you think? If Colorado got to play Pittsburgh and all that stuff, and Louisville had to play, the Pac-12 as we knew it, it'd probably be pretty similar. And I mean, it's just amazing to me that like a team like Louisville completely flies under the radar when it comes to transfer portaling, and yet I see them every day in there, whether it be for Ja'Cory Brooks, whether it be for Thor Griffith, whether it be for Colin Lacey. I mean, it's incredible how they've just like been able to build through the portal because it's like we said, nobody considers the ACC a Power Five conference anymore. Apparently, it's a second-year head coach, and out of nowhere, they're just like rebuilding through the portal. And it's just amazing to me that like nobody seems to talk about them, but they're doing the exact same thing that Deion Sanders has been doing in Colorado. It's just with a lot less, flamboyance to it. And then
I
you
think
look at
that
Colorado.
flamboyance is that flamboyance is the difference, though.
Yes, that's a big difference. That's the only difference. And for better or worse, we can get into the semantics of why that is.
Hmm.
But it's just interesting to me. It really is because you look at what Colorado's doing. It's just rinse and repeat. I thought that the dumbest prediction I made on our fun hypothetical transfer podcast was Colorado replacing their entire offensive line, and they replaced their entire offensive line through the portal, and that's just great. And just today, they got former TCU wide receiver Cordell Russell. They got a guy from LSU, Quincy Wiggins, to come in. He's a defensive end. He's on the roster now. It just amazes me, when Deion Sanders said he had the Louis Vuitton bags coming, he wasn't kidding.
No.
And you'd think that after like 1 year where they go like 4-8, it's a little bit of a disappointment. Oh, the hype will die down. No, they go out and they get Will Shepard from Vanderbilt. They go out and they get just about whoever the heck they want. They get Arden Walker. I mean, it's just incredible, man. It's just incredible to watch these guys go to work.
Absolutely. And of course, with Louisville, I mean, I was looking at the transfer list today, and of course, Ja'Cory Brooks is a recruit I remember when he was getting recruited for Bama, and that's going to be another big target. And yeah, so Jeff Brom definitely has Louisville turning into a really well-oiled machine. And like you said, he's been doing it very similarly through the portal. He just again isn't as flamboyant, so we don't talk about it as much. But another school that's really making some noise again through the portal that I think we need to put in that category is Ole Miss. They're currently number
Yeah.
two. Yeah, they're currently number 2 in the transfer portal rankings right now. Talk about the job Lane Kiffin has been doing in Ole Miss since the portal really became a prevalent thing.
Hold on a second. I need to bring something up because I had something written about this, and
Okay.
now it's just like, where did it go? My phone also decided to update before we came on the air, so it's just like, great.
We're having so many technical difficulties before we even started the show.
Yes, it was like a mad dash. We were so frustrated. Okay. Ah, I mean, it's just I think we kind of have a tendency to underrate what Old Miss does, just because they don't find like ways to win like the SEC West every year. But I mean, Lane Kiffin is nobody you want to shake a stick at. These people out there in Mississippi, they care about Ole Miss, and you look what they've already done. Ugh, phone. They've got Tyler Barron to come in from Tennessee. They've got Tamarion McDonald to come in from Tennessee. They've got a lot of. They got Lewis Moore, a guy who I was really keen on. He's a former IU guy. He's really good. That's going to help them out greatly. I mean, there's not much you could say other than I guess Lane Kiffin. For however much we criticize him, for however much you know, however much we think we know about him, he's always surprising because you always think that Ole Miss is just a forgettable program in the SEC West, and then they come out and they do stuff like this, and it's just like they get their quarter. No, they didn't get him. They get all kinds of players every year by using their NIL connections. They're pretty good. And I'm just waiting for the team that finally bursts through for Lane Kiffin. And this year might be it. I don't know. Because I think they've improved where they need to improve, which was getting a better defense that can stop a nosebleed. And once they do that, I think they'll be pretty okay. I really do. It's just weird to me to watch us talk about Ole Miss in general, just like they're an afterthought. When in reality, they do this every year, and they usually end up 9-3. It's just because they can't beat those big teams that we think they stink, and that couldn't be further from the truth.
Another player that I want to talk about, and this is a player that I remember in the recruiting cycle years ago, and he was the number one ranked receiver in his class. And it really was a shame because he's a very talented receiver, but he just was a victim of falling into a very deep wide receiver room. And it, to me, was only a matter of time before he entered the portal. And I'm actually surprised that he waited this long to get into the portal. And that's Julian Fleming. The crystal ball currently has him going to Penn State at the moment. And I think that could be an absolutely huge weapon for the Nittany Lions because you look at a Penn State receiving core, some with Dante Cephas and everything, guys that were expected to be great this past offseason for Drew Aller, but and they really in a lot of ways underperformed. You could blame that partially on Aller, you could blame it partially on the offensive coordinator play calling, but Julian Fleming to me is one of the more talented receivers in this transfer portal that's really not getting enough love because he really didn't get an opportunity to really shine at Ohio State. But he's a very talented guy. He could maybe be that difference maker in the wide receiver room to maybe give Drew Aller another target to actually go off of.
Yeah, I would agree with that one.
I'll say, I see where you froze, but can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I couldn't hear you through most of that, but I got the end part, so we're good.
You heard the end part of Julian Fleming.
Yes, I did. I heard the gospel of Julian Fleming.
Fair enough. Say that wraps up about everybody that I really wanted to talk about. I mean, Matt, I'm sure you have a couple guys you want to add while we still have time on the show.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to Kentucky here for a minute because they've quietly put together another really good portal class out of nowhere. The gem, of course, I guess we talked about this last year being Vandergrift from coming from Georgia to UK, but they made a move that was pretty interesting to me, getting Chip Trayaman from Ohio State to come in.
Hmm.
They got Raymond Cottrell from Texas A&M, and the one that really interests me, Jamori Macklin from
Hmm.
North Texas. He's a really good wide receiver who played kind of under the radar, and I'm excited to see what he's going to bring to Kentucky because we talked about this a little bit last episode with not Drew Aller, Devin Leary. I'm sorry, looking a little bit disappointing for what a lot of us expected. I don't think that's going to happen again. I think Kentucky is really loading up on offense, and I'm excited to see where that goes, especially with Liam Cohen behind the reins there. I think next year's Louisville Kentucky game is going to be like even better than this year's, and that's going to be hard to top. Because I mean, these offenses are revamping, they're retooling, and I think they're both going to be explosive as we go forward. And another one, talking about you remember last week too, how I told you I was more excited than ever about Big Ten quarterback play. I
Right.
still am because Indiana goes out of nowhere and gets Curtis Rourke from Ohio, a dude who
Hmm.
I've been very high on throughout the entire process of the transfer portal. And Will Rogers finally commits to Washington after a long time. Man, it's going to be fun to watch Big Ten quarterback play. I never thought I'd say that. Even in Iowa, we're going to have fun at the quarterback position. But yeah, I like what Kentucky's done. Indiana got a really good quarterback. Louisville's doing good. Ohio Valley football, baby, it's on the rise. We're going to get somewhere.
I like it. And one more shout out I do want to have is a guy close to home with one of my Duke guys, Jordan Waters has entered the transfer portal, but Manny Diaz was able to keep Jacquez Moore on the roster, which I think was really big for his first stint, for his early stages as the Duke head coach. But Jordan Waters, the crystal ball has him going to NC State, so this definitely looks like a move to where there's a change in coaching staff, but he still wants to stay close to home. So I just wanted to wish Jordan Waters the best of luck. I think was a very good player for Duke this year, and I wish him nothing but the best.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all for that. I think that's a good thing to say, Les. We don't we have a tendency even among fans to have a kind of have a negative reaction a lot of times to players moving. But if we want to treat sports like a business, it's a business, and you got to go where you got to go. And another one I wanted to talk about for you, Les, and your Texas Longhorns. I
You almost called
really
me
love,
Tex. I like it.
I really loved when them getting Trey Moore from
Hmm.
UTSA at defensive end. He's going to be really good. I'm telling you, Tech. Well, when did that happen? I didn't even see this. When did
What
Texas
happened?
get? When did Texas sign Andrew Mabuka from
So
Clemson?
yeah, I think yes. Yeah. No, wait. Did they actually sign him? I know he was a target.
I think he's.
This might have been. This
They
might
have
have
him at
happened while we were on the show, low key.
100% committed on the website I'm looking at. That's a huge for that defense.
That's 100. That's 100% crystal ball. He hasn't committed yet. I was gonna say because he hasn't officially committed, but yeah, that is where the crystal ball is leading him to go.
These crystal balls are confusing, and I hate them. Either say he's there or don't say it at all, people. I'm very confused. And I mean, yeah, the guy I couldn't think about earlier was Antoine Wells leaving South Carolina for Ole Miss. That's another huge weapon to get, in addition to getting a couple of the top defensive guys in the portal in Walter Nolan and the guy from Florida whose name I'm going to butcher in Princely Umanamalayan. Oh, that's not right. Umanmalayan, I think is how you pronounce it. Princely Umanmalayan. I think, like I said, their big problem was defense. They're getting a better defense. I like that. And like I said, I'm really impressed with Texas so far. They've had another good portal, and it pains me to say that. But I wanted to ask you one last thing before we go. It's officially happened, and Washington is off the board. Where do you think is the most likely landing spot for Malik Murphy?
That's a good question. A question I was not prepared to answer, to be
Oh, I'm
completely
sorry.
honest.
If you just had to do it right now,
If I had to do it right now, I'm
no
trying to
thoughts,
think.
no spot.
I'm trying to think, and maybe go to Nevada. He's got a former Texas coach on staff. Maybe lower level competition. Be able to like even though Jeff Choate wasn't an offensive coach at Texas, he was the co-defensive coordinator for Texas. He does have some ties with Malik Murphy and all that. So maybe Nevada. But I have a feeling he's going to want to go somewhere a little bigger than Nevada. Um, I'm trying to think. We had a receiver coach, and I'm completely blanking on this, but we had a wide receiver coach that committed to be that signed to be the offensive coordinator for somewhere out west, and I can't think of it for the life of me. But maybe go there. But yeah, Washington I feel like was such a good move on paper because of how much that offense is predicated on the deep ball. And if there's anything Malik Murphy can do, it's throw the deep ball. But yeah, again, I wish Malik Murphy nothing but the best. And I knew he would be a very good college level quarterback, but I knew just given the names on the roster, it would not be at Texas.
Right.
I'll say, especially with Quinn Ewers potentially come back next year. Now, Arch Manning has supposedly consistently improved from the beginning of fall to now. And yeah, he just wasn't going to be. He wants to go somewhere where he can play clearly. So
Right, and you can't blame a guy for that at all.
but what may be intriguing is what about LSU? They're going to need a quarterback next year.
That
They're
would
going
be
to
a
have
lot of
receivers to
fun.
him to throw to. I mean, that would be a lot of fun.
That would
And
be a lot of fun.
And then and of course, we know what LSU can do with guys that, just fall deep in a loaded quarterback room, AKA Mr. Joe Burr, system quarterback confirmed over here.
I just had to. It was too much fun to resist.
I
Jake
mean, I
Browning,
know Jake
Jake
Browning's
Browning,
turned it up.
man. I do want to say too. One thing that does surprise me about this portal too. I can understand why Ole Miss, Louisville, Colorado are doing well. A team that surprises me is how well freaking Arizona State is doing in this.
Yeah, they
They
got
got
Raleek Brown from
yeah,
USC. That was the big one.
they got another one. They got Kamari. Oh, what's his name? They got a safety from. Let me look it up. My notes app crashed before we did this, and it took away everything I had worked for, and so I'm kind of salty about that. So that's why I'm off. Here it is. They've got Kamari Wilson from Florida, and I just want to know they have like the third or fourth overall ranked transfer class right now, depending on where you look. So they're not once again they're going into the Big 12 swinging, which is impressive,
Hmm.
especially for a team you just don't think about. The Sun Devil is an inherently cool mascot, but they really haven't had too much on the field success as of late to, you make that seem like it would be a super sexy destination. And you
Right.
can't even claim the Jaden Daniels effect because he didn't do it for them.
Right. Yeah. Jaden Daniels really didn't come into his own until he got to LSU, and I don't really think that was on Jaden Daniels because I actually thought I thought he was a very solid quarterback at Arizona State, but I think he just didn't have the supporting cast around him to really showcase it.
And Herm
And
Edwards also.
I do want to end on this note because as we talked about the last podcast, Riley Leonard going to Notre Dame, something we kind of knew was going to happen from the very beginning of the portal. He had the no contact clause. Notre Dame was the crystal ball, and we've seen Notre Dame really change in and out receivers the last couple of transfer portal classes, and now they're doing it again this year. So it looks like they're really bringing in some guys that can play well with Riley Leonard. So now we just wait to see what they do at the running back position because Audric Estime did end up deciding to go pro. This
Yeah,
might be the time. Bring Ashton Jeanty to Notre Dame.
we could get this one right. And
We
the other
could.
thing that makes and the other thing that makes me especially curious to see what else Notre Dame was going to do is the pressure is on Marcus Freeman.
Mhm.
Whether it should be there or not, it's there. And what kind of moves do you make to have a home run season, especially in the 12-team playoff era we're in now, to make sure that you at least get a berth in the playoffs? And they've already started, like you said, they've gotten some guys that Riley Leonard knows. They've gotten some guys tailored to his game style, but where do you get that home run move that's like the Ashton Jeanty that you can like predicate like having an even better offense than last year on?
Just imagine a read option with Ashton Jeanty and Riley Leonard.
That would be
Sorry,
fun.
you're not stopping that. And just
That
run
would be fun.
RPOs with Riley Leonard and Ashton Jeanty, and then you bring in some receivers from the portal that really predicate to what Riley Leonard does well as a passer. That's going to be a scary offense.
That's
Make it
gonna be
happen, Notre
very
Dame. Go after
bring it on,
Ashton
Notre
Jeanty.
Dame.
But anyways, we got about 1 minute left, so I think it's officially time to wrap up another episode of the Less is More Sports podcast. As always, like and subscribe to Less is More Sports YouTube and Spotify channels. Follow our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Threads. That's at Less is More Sports. And until next time, we out.
We'll see you next week or
Yes, sir.
sometime. Well, it's
Or
Christmas Eve,
sometime.
so maybe not.
Maybe not. We might have to talk about the offensive line, the big lineman of the portal, another week after the holidays.
Maybe not at all. We'll see how it goes.
We'll see.
Santa's in the transfer portal.
Santa is the transfer portal.
He is. He brings